Good morning. Good morning and welcome to this session where we have a couple of interesting talks for you this Friday morning. First up we have Noelette and Rosie and Claire from the UCC Inclusivity team. It's a difficult one to get on a Friday morning. And they're going to be talking to us about transforming the response to technology-enabled abuse, building partnerships between UCC Communities, industry and government for lasting impact. And first up is Noelette.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. As mentioned, my name is Noelette Hurley, and I am an IT analyst in UCC, and I also am part of the IT Inclusivity Committee, and I work with Rosie and Claire. Rosie is the head of Enterprise Solutions, and Claire is an systems analyst, also in Enterprise Solutions, and both myself and Claire are in the Inclusivity Committee. We're here this morning talking about transforming the response to technology-facilitated abuse, and I just want to give a very small trigger warning at the beginning, as it does reference abuse, and there will be signposts throughout to different services that are available for anybody that may recognise themselves in any of the content here. So we're going to begin just watching a very short video, so just slightly under 1 minute, so if I could just have your attention for that.
It's time for zero tolerance.
For domestic abuse.
For sexual harassment.
For gender-based violence.
Zero tolerance of unwanted texting, unwanted touching.
Zero laughing off the inappropriate.
Zero tolerance of victim shaming, of being bought or sold.
Zero sexual harassment, sexual violence, rape.
It's time for zero excuses.
Zero being afraid of a partner, hiding the bruises.
Zero not being believed, asking why didn't you say no.
Feeling there's no safe place.
It's time for zero tolerance.
Zero turning a blind eye to mental, physical and emotional abuse.
In our streets, in our homes, in our beds. Domestic, sexual and gender-based violence has zero place in our society.
The video that you just watched, it outlines both in-person harm, but it also highlights online harm. And what we're talking about this morning, technology-facilitated abuse, is a form of online harm. You might be familiar with terms like cyberbullying, image-based abuse. Technology-facilitated abuse is another format of that. And it is when technology is used to harass, control, stalk, impersonate, or threaten another individual. When technology-facilitated abuse is in play, it is often a form of controlling behaviour. It leads to coercion, having people behave in a manner that they wouldn't normally. And again, it is all supported and it is all implemented using the technology that we have become dependent on in our day-to-day lives. If we are curious about technology-facilitated abuse and we're asking ourselves, what is it? How bad is it? There is, unfortunately, a gap in the research, both nationally and internationally. We don't have a full sense of how prevalent it is and what the lived experience is for individuals, particularly women who are victims of it. We need research and we need data so that we can properly plan and implement intervention tactics and plan and provide support services. So because the data and the research locally is still emerging, it's still developing, we have to look to other countries that are slightly further along in their research, and they have some outputs for us to look at. In 2022, Australia did one of the largest studies in this area, and it involved 4,526 individuals who were surveyed. And we have some of the statistics that came out of that survey. The first time that I read this slide and put together this slide, I was very much like, no way. 1 in 2 Australian adults have had at least one experience of technology-facilitated abuse victimization in their lifetime. We'll translate 1 in 2, 50% of adults over the age of 18 have experienced technology-facilitated abuse. 62% of the victims said the perpetrator was a man in their most recent experience, And of that 50%, 37% said that it was an intimate partner or an ex-partner. If, like me, the 1 in 2 has you disbelieving, it helps if you have a better understanding of the types of behaviours that actually fall under the technology-facilitated abuse umbrella. It is both very visible sometimes, and it can be very invisible, so overt and covert. TFA might take the form of multiple harassing emails, telephone calls, and messages, hundreds throughout a day. But it can also be forwarding somebody's email to your account without their knowledge or consent. It can be installing malware on a device belonging to them to track them, to interpret and interrupt their messaging so that you're keeping tabs on where they're going and who they're talking to. It can be placing an Apple tag somewhere on their person that, again, they have no knowledge of and have not given consent for. It can be using a child's device to track a parent. It can be installing a Ring camera for their security, but the feed is on your phone. And when we have a grasp of the breadth of devices, your Fitbit, your Internet of Things, all of these can be misused by individuals. And once we realize the breadth of devices that we are talking about and the breadth of behaviors that fall under TFA, you realize, oh, it can be 1 in 2. It is 1 in 2. Once they were deeper into the research and the individuals being surveyed understood what technology-facilitated abuse was and had a greater understanding of it, 1 in 4 Australian adults reported having engaged in at least one technology-facilitated abusive behaviour. So 25% of the 4,526 respondents put their hand up and said, I recognise that behaviour in myself. With this knowledge, it is clear that we need to know more. We need to know more about what's happening in Ireland so that we can have those prevention tactics, that we can have that education, and we can have those supports. So that is what Rosie is going to be speaking about now. And for anybody curious, the QR codes will take you to the research paper. Thank you.
So just a little bit about the context in Ireland. So the technology that we've been talking about a lot in this conference, things like surveillance technology, IoT, generative AI, are all really powerful tools and powerful advancements in technology. But it's exactly that type of technology that can be exploited for online harm. And it's this type of technology that has amplified this type of coercive behaviour, particularly in gender-based violence situations. So speaking to Safe Ireland, and Safe Ireland are the national body working to eradicate gender-based violence in Ireland. They have 39 domestic violence services across Ireland. And from their perspective, they observe that the healthy behaviours regarding the use of technology is really evolved. And in some cases, what you may not recognise the symptoms of technology-facilitated abuse, and it actually might be perceived as normal behaviour. And this has absolutely been amplified over the couple of years of lockdown. And I suppose the rapid increase of these types of technologies and the rapid increase of surveillance, doorbells, Internet of Things, heating, like a couple of examples that might make you think and pause, like the use of convenience technology in the Internet of Things with controlling heating online. And there was an example of a female who had a barring order against a perpetrator, but remotely he was able to increase her heating in her room, and actually with the motive of using all her oil, so she would run out, she'd no money to pay for it, or actually making her home really uncomfortable. And technology is omnipresent, so if somebody is in an unhealthy relationship, on whatever scale it might be a little bit controlling up to quite abusive. Often the escape might be going to work or going shopping, but the role of technology is omnipresent. So that incessant messaging that Noelette is mentioning means that there's really very little escape mentally for that victim. But one of the things that Safe Ireland have really said that they've struggled with in the last couple of years around their services is a skills gap, and a skills gap in supporting people who present with symptoms of technology-facilitated abuse, and which are generally social workers or frontline services, nurses, guards, who have a radar for people in trouble, but when people come up with symptoms of surveillance and technology, there's really a gap in their understanding of how to help that person. And then just a little bit on the law. So the video that Noelette shared at the top of the presentation was with the launch of the Domestic, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Strategy under Minister McEntee last year. There's a very serious commitment from government around zero tolerance for gender-based violence and for domestic violence. And in this, there's a very detailed action plan, and there's the establishment of an online regulator, an online safety commissioner, which is under Commissioner Mann, which is the Safety and Media Regulation Act, just enacted this year. This also coincides with just a very recent, I think Ireland and France just signed the EU Digital Services Act last month, which is around the role of big technology companies in online harm and safety by design. So coming up with mechanisms and regulations more around this space. If it's, you can draw a parallel to GDPR and the Data Protection Commissioner and the obligations on organisations around privacy. This is like the obligations on technology companies, and particularly around safety and safety by design. But the reality is that a lot of this is emerging, and what I've talked about is in the last 12 months. And a lot of what we would see within the GDR space, so any of us that have worked in cyber, is that there's a lot of guidance and a lot of supports for organisations around how to comply with these laws. There's very little around that right now. And equally, there's very little for the services who might need to provide some support around people who are victims, or society in general, if you fall victim under these types of harms. And so that's where there's a very real and prevalent issue today and in today's society across all generations. So that's where this National Task Force around cybersecurity awareness have stepped in and stepped up. So this was founded by a small group of females who worked in advancing, original motive was promoting female voices in cybersecurity, and who became aware of this, this gap and said, I think we can help here. Like a lot of the protections around this type of thing is like cyber protections, it's cyber hygiene, it's the same type of protections that protect against all of these digital harms. So it was pulled together, a task force for pulling together across multiple industries, voluntary basis, working directly with Safe Ireland and understanding what the problem was, sitting down with Safe Ireland, understanding what their problems were, what are the things that they're seeing, and developing a strategy to support and help, and a detailed action plan. This is over the last 2 years we've been working together to develop, I suppose it's an action-orientated task force, immediately coming out with supports to help people on this kind of very urgent problem. So one of the, I just explained a couple of the things that have come out under the task force. So one of the things we did was a national billboard campaign last year, at the end of last year, coinciding with Cyber Awareness Month, and we ran this around Cork City. It was supported by Cyber Skills, and this was actually a billboard campaign. The motive was really to drive awareness around red flags. So this was around just driving awareness to the population. And red flags are abuse. So some of these red flags are abuse. This is an unhealthy relationship. And a lot of the motivation is, if you're trying to target like different cohorts in society, if you recognise these behaviours, it's probably an unhealthy behaviour, get out. It does go up to a much greater scale in terms of technology facilitated abuse and how badly it can be used. But you know, part of one of the streams of the strategy is to just drive awareness to the general public around this type of thing. So one of the examples is oversharing your location, or someone requesting you to overshare your location. This is quite challenging because a lot of the Snapchats and like the modern tools nowadays, social media encourage oversharing, and it's part of normal behaviour for younger people, but it's more driving behaviours around, do you feel safe with that, are you comfortable with that type of behaviour? Another example, and 2 other billboards that we had, was around financial control. So financial control is a very effective mechanism for coercion, and it's a very effective method of controlling somebody. That's all very digital. And then the same with incessant messaging. So an example, I don't know if you know about the Garda Moody case, which was last year, and that came out, and this is all under coercive control law. Like, whereas that incessant messaging, I think his victim had over 300,000 messages from him. Like, so I think it was equating to a message a minute. And if you can imagine your phone getting a message a minute, and that type of, what that can feel like. So also we talked about our work at the Cyber Ireland conference. So that's a national conference for cyber, and in this conference our UCC student Alicia, and we'll talk about her in a minute, and she shared her story, and some of the services talked about the gap, again, to raise awareness and to talk about the role of technology companies and kind of nudge technology companies to thinking about this. But also we had the media at it, and to talk about some of the cases who report against some of the more serious cases of this, and the role of technology, which often gets kind of left out when we're talking about this problem. And in generally, if we were to talk about what is needed to really address technology-facilitated abuse, it really is around companies. They need to build safer products. At the moment, there's a lot of self-regulation in the space. There's very little motivation, unfortunately, because can't be commercialised. So they don't think about safety by design. Similarly, and so that's where the law and enforcement is going to come in. But it would be nice if technology companies did say, like, does this children's toy need to have internet connectivity? Is end-to-end encryption, really needed for this? And that's important when it comes to cases, because often what perpetrators might do is pivot children into a communications channel that is encrypted rather than open, as a means to, be protecting the perpetrator in that case. And as well, what's absolutely needed is demystifying the reporting process for technology-facilitated abuse. So in Ireland, we have hotline.ie. That's a mechanism for one stream of technology-facilitated abuse, which is image-based abuse, and the mechanism of reporting that, which, is like making sure that people are aware of that, and really the role of AI and its role in preventing and detecting abuse patterns in technology spaces. It's very good at nudging us to buy something or introducing new content for us. It absolutely has the capability of detecting and intercepting abusive patterns, be it repetitive messages, be it, language, understanding the language that might be around that, images, and really there's no motive for the big organisations to include that in their strategies at the moment. And hopefully that will come with some of the new legislation, but that is really what is needed. And the research that Noelette mentioned, like the concluding recommendation from that, is more partnership with technology companies, academia and government and the frontline services to understand the problem and to develop education and awareness across all of society to help prevent this problem. So just I want to introduce you to Alicia. So Alicia is a UCC student, and she just shares her experience. And so this is kind of the question is, why UCC and why did we do this?
Last Thursday, I woke up around 11 o'clock, I'd say, turned on my phone and was still in bed, and woke up to about 100 messages, I'd say, from friends and families and followers on Instagram. People had texted me on different platforms as well, telling me that there had been an account made in my name that had requested to follow them or had followed them, depending on if they were private or public. People were sending me the link to the account, but I wasn't able to view it. So obviously at this point, just turned over and woken up and seen people sending me screenshots of this account. And some of the people were being like, I've reported it. So naturally, when I couldn't see the account, I knew straight away it was something bad. It wasn't just some silly account. And then I started to receive screenshots of some of the images that they were putting up. They were of girls, not my images, but they were nude images of girls without their faces, purporting them to be me. And they'd also use some of my own photos to promote some link to what I assume is some pornographic website that you have to pay for. It was just a horrific situation to be in.
So Alicia, if that wasn't bad enough, Alicia went on to report this to the guards, her local guards. She's a very strong person. She had a big following. She was involved in the student union. She was involved in sustainability. So she had a big following, over 2,000. And when her father actually brought her to report to the guards. I'm sharing this with her permission. She uses this story to bring about change. And when she went to the guards to report it, she came out of it. She said the reporting of the incident was actually almost as bad as the incident in itself. She was victim shamed. Why was her account public? Why did she have pictures up there? Why did she have so much of a following? Now, she turned that into a positive. She established Safety Over Sigma as a result, which was a forum to talk about these issues, and they lobbied government, and they ended up addressing the Oireachtas around the formation of the online safety bill, and so she turned it into a positive. But in UCC, this is the type of things that can happen with students. We good? We okay? Okay. I'll just conclude now in a minute. So why UCC? That's why. It's because we have students like Alicia that we want to protect. That could be a disclosure to a staff member. It could also be there's a disclosure for anybody who's a manager and somebody could report to it. It's also part of the objectives of the EDI unit, the inclusivity team here, and it's part of the strategic plan in terms of bringing about societal change for these types of spaces. So I'm going to pass you on to Claire now. So Claire is going to talk a little bit more about the process of developing the badge in UCC.
So just turn it off can't be the solution. And to borrow a phrase from HEAnet themselves, connectivity matters. So vulnerable people need to stay safely connected so that they can access their own support networks and also the support services that are available. So part of the motivation for the digital badge was to educate and to create a short accessible course that could educate people on how to do just that. Now, we launched the pilot only this week, and we'll be launching the digital badge proper in early 2024. And it has a strong parallel with the UCC Bystander Intervention course, which is nationally available to students. And it provides them with an understanding of key issues around sexual abuse and sexual assault and consent, etc., etc. So we've drawn on that type of a framework in order to produce a comprehensive course introducing the concept of technology-facilitated abuse. And it's for, I suppose, a diverse audience because it's a pervasive problem, obviously, across society. So it's beneficial for all ages and stages and also for frontline workers. And it provides guidance on certain topics like stalkerware, deepfake, Internet of Things, and explains more basic things such as how to manage location services, because it could be used by so many different sectors of society. Some will be more technically capable than others, so we have to try and cover off all of that content. And it also looks at things like how to support people who are experiencing TFA, human trafficking vulnerabilities, things like intersectionality, and also, you know, the topic of safety by design, as Rosie referred to earlier. And it's an example of using technology as a tool to combat TFA. So we used various different types of technology within the course itself to try and create interactive and interesting content that could be viewed by, you know, the learners basically for the course. So the task force that Rosie referred to earlier had built a warm and collaborative relationship with the Australian E-Safety Commissioner's Office. And they are I suppose, the North Star, or the blazing a trail in this space. And as Noelette referred to, there's not an awful lot in this space at the moment. So the approach we took was benchmarked against their approach to it. So the Australian E-Safety Commissioner's Office have recently launched their national strategy, and internationalisation and collaboration is one of their key topics, because this is a borderless crime, so internationalisation is quite important. So the Technology Facilitated Abuse booklet that was created by the Irish Task Force was shared by the Australian counterparts with UNFPA, and it is an example of using open source content but putting it within the context of the cultural and legal position in Ireland. So we think that over time, as there's more work done on this and as we deliver more in this frame, that the badge that we have created will actually answer to and align with the internationalisation as set out by the Australian E-Safety Commissioner's Office. So we had to draw on from a wide range of experts in order to curate and collect and develop this course. So we had people from a diverse range of areas and a diverse range of contributors, and drawing on their respective areas of expertise, then we could join forces. And as you know, it is a collaborative, all of this is very much a collaborative course. We meticulously designed and developed this course. So I suppose, as Rosie referred to and as Noelette referred to, I mean, it can affect so many people in so many different ways. We have people who are affected by it and they are, you know, affected as victims. We have the areas of support that need more information on how to actually manage the situation if someone comes to them and reports that they have been a victim of facilitated abuse. So we wanted to fuse, I suppose, academia, technology, legal services, and all sorts of, to provide a very comprehensive and easy to understand digital badge, which could be a point at which we start to tackle this issue within the country. So these are the sectors that we used, or that we drew from in order to create this, were from frontline services. We had Garda representatives, legal representatives, frontline services and technology experts working with us on this. And it was an interdisciplinary approach that we took in order to provide a kind of, I suppose, a very wide-ranging and a very holistic approach to technology facilitated abuse. And there are multi-dimensional implications to all of this. So we were very keen to get as much information from as many experts as we could. And I have a clip here from Detective Chief Superintendent Colm Noonan. Yeah, if you could play that for me, just to give you a view of some of the content that we included in this.
In respect of intimate image abuse, commonly referred to as sextortion, that's now an offence under the Harassment, Harmful Communications and Related Offences Act of 2020, commonly referred to as COCO's law, and it has given An Garda Síochána the powers to tackle intimate image abuse. We in An Garda Síochána recognise the harm that intimate image abuse is creating to individuals, to families and to society. We really do understand that people are being affected in their lives and how they function because somebody threatens to reveal an image that has been provided in an intimate relationship and now is being used to destroy their lives. So we are working exceptionally hard, and we've professional, dedicated people to bring offenders who are involved in that type of crime to justice. And that's in the National Bureau and in the Divisional Protective Services units.
If you could stop it there. Thank you. So this allows the learners to be exposed to a rich tapestry of perspectives, and it will allow them to engage critically with the subject matter. And the idea behind it would be that they will be able to make a positive impact in their respective fields in the case of professionals, but also as citizens, that they will be able to assist and support people that they come into contact with who have experienced this type of abuse. I'll just display this quotation from Mary McDermott, who's the CEO of Safe Ireland and is also an adjunct professor in the School of Applied Social Studies in UCC. All of this work really was collaborative. I can't stress that enough. There was a lot of work done by a lot of different people from a lot of different areas to try and catch all the various different points and try and ensure we covered off as much as possible when developing this digital badge. Because it is a pervasive issue and it does affect people from all backgrounds and all ages and all stages of life, and it needed this collaborative approach and this variety of different contributors in order to reflect that. And drawing on the local and the global content was very important to us because it is a worldwide phenomenon and it knows no borders. And in addition to which, the technology that's used is available globally as well. And to speak a little bit about our UCC counterparts, without whom this couldn't have been done. The course itself is anchored in the School of Applied Social Studies, and the IT services team and units within the IT services team did contribute quite a lot to this, and we have to thank them for doing so. The IT inclusivity team, which Noelette and I are a member of, were involved in it from the get-go. We got a lot of work from the cybersecurity team, producing videos and content for us, and managing some of that with us, and also the audio-visual team, who worked really hard to get some of the video content, which really enriched the digital badge itself. And also great support from Professor Louise Crowley, who manages and developed the bystander intervention programme. She was a great support in getting this particular digital badge and guiding us on how to get this digital badge developed. We also drew from Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Unit, and from the continuing professional development team. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. When we were developing this, so we have to definitely make reference to that and make sure that they are thanked on that also. Okay. Will I just? Okay, so just, I suppose, we all have a role to play in ensuring online civility, so people can strive to be upstanders and do their best to call out intimate image abuse anytime they do come across it. And it's a passion project, and it was a passion project for all involved, who spent, their spare time and time outside of work giving to this and allowing us to develop this digital badge. So we live in a digital world, and our digital space is as important to protect as our personal or our physical space. And it has relevance to all of our lives, those with young children, with teenagers, sisters, siblings. We can all be touched by it in any capacity in our lives. So thanks for listening. I know it is a heavy enough topic, but we believe what we have done is created a tool to actually combat the area of technology facilitated abuse. We're finished. Okay, I'll wrap it up there. There's always plenty more to say on this particular topic, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Noelette and Rosie and Claire. We don't have any questions on Slido, but I'm sure they'll answer any questions in person after the talk, and we're going to move on to the next one now. So next up we have Dr. David Laverty from, that's the wrong talk. Give me a second. David Laverty from Queen's University Belfast, and he's going to be talking about monitoring the Irish electrical power grid. So take it away, David, we're running a bit behind, so off you go.
Super, no problem at all. Oops. Thanks very much for coming. So, I'm an electrical engineer with kind of a very sort of diverse set of interests, meaning that I've sort of done almost everything that I can do with electrical and electronic technology, other than actually design any electrical grids. But my main interest is actually in trying to measure and understand what is going on in these systems. So, to give you an idea of what we're at, we know what the electricity grid is, like in terms of big pylons that we see across the landscape, and often lots of no pylon signs along roads where there's new builds planned. And there's an extensive network of these across the island of Ireland, which is a nice little small electrical grid, because normally these things span entire continents, and you get all sorts of interesting behaviours in them. Now, what we see in the likes of the United States, where they already have some grid monitoring, they would claim a very extensive amount, but tends to be quite old in how they do things. But what they see is, in this example, there's been a disturbance on the electricity grid in New York, and that has sort of perturbated out and caused all of these follow-on disturbances across the eastern grid of the United States. Now, Ireland, of course, would fit into a small section of that map. But our transition towards renewable generation is making our grid, to put it simply, more wobbly. Because what's happening is that the big, massive thermal power stations, which have huge rotating machines in them, are getting displaced for wind turbines and solar generation and other types of low-carbon technologies. The kinetic energy in that rotating mass is no longer connected to the grid. So when a fault happens, the grid's an awful lot more dynamic. It's more shaky. And we're trying to understand that, because in understanding that, we'll be able to develop solutions to improve the way that the grid is operated and ultimately to accommodate more low-carbon technologies. So how we do that is with this type of technology called a phasor measurement unit. I'll not go into a tremendous amount of detail on this other than to say it requires time synchronization. Because what's going on is the phasor measurement unit, it measures the mostly sinusoidal voltages and currents that exist on the electricity grid. It digitizes them, and then it does this mathematical operation, and it turns them into a thing called a phasor, or strictly speaking, a synchrophasor, because what we're going to do is we're going to time synchronize the whole process. By time synchronizing the process, it means that if I measure the grid in Dublin or measure it in Killarney, the measurements were taken at basically the same instant in time. Now, I said in the previous slide that we need better than 1 microsecond for the measurements to be useful. We've actually been spoiled rotten. We normally use GNSS technologies like GPS to do this, and we typically get better than 50 nanoseconds time synchronization, so it tends to be very, very good. This is a project of mine called OpenPMU, which is the open source phasor measurement unit. And again, I'll skim over the details, but happy to chat over a tea or a coffee about the details. 10 years ago, actually probably more like 15 years ago at this stage, I was very frustrated at what was available on the market commercially. The electrical power world is interesting. Technology is expected to last a very long time, and there's tremendous long tails of legacy in that sector. And so in around about, it would have been about 2008, state-of-the-art phasor measurement unit was running on a 48060X2. It's like, that's not great. And it meant that it was rather incapable, couldn't really be upgraded, couldn't do an awful lot, and fed up hacking solutions with this sort of commercially available technology. I thought, the hell with it, I'm going to build my own. So I built my own, open sourced it, and it's all available at openpmu.org. Oh, and ironically, when we talk about we need a fast computer to do this, by this stage, Raspberry Pi is now more than fast enough to do this. So, much in the same way as the flux capacitor makes time travel possible, time synchronization is what makes monitoring the grid possible, and what's what makes phasor measurement units possible. So, what's the problem? Well, okay, arguably humans have been, building clocks for millennia. Look at the likes of Newgrange or the pyramids, all these celestial clocks. Great. But rather coarse in terms of their time synchronization. Where precise time synchronization starts to come into play is during the 18th century, when there was the longitude rewards. And famously, John Harrison, who was not a member of the aristocracy, developed his H4C clock, which allowed the British Admiralty to navigate the seas and consequently all the fallout around that. But ultimately, he created this way of providing time synchronization to ships for the purposes of navigation. That's what GPS is for. That's what GNSS is for. Curiously, what exactly is the GPS constellation of satellites for? Anyone will volunteer an answer to that? The military, yeah. Any specific branch of the military? Any particular application? Yeah, the American military, yeah. I love asking this question in lectures, and a lot of my students say, it's so you can order an Uber or get a pizza delivered. It's like, well, yeah, but generally speaking, some sort of like hydrogen bomb-based pizza, maybe, in the direction of the USSR, that's what GPS is for. It's amazing that that's sort of kind of been forgotten. Consequence of that is, well, to get the resolution required, GNSS is really solving two problems simultaneously. The receiver has to know what time it is to work out the propagation delay from the satellites. So the satellites transmit two things. The satellites transmit where in the sky they are and what time it is. And it's a whole complicated thing, multilateration, it's called, mathematical operation, where the receiver both synchronizes itself to the time of day and then works out how far away it is from the satellites and determines its position. We can buy these things called substation clocks. Substation clocks are just a little GPS receiver like what you would have in your mobile phone with fancy screens and support for myriad protocols, usually very, very old ones, to fit in with often 1970s, 1980s hardware that will still exist in a lot of electricity substations. But we're not going to speak about that because that's old. What we're going to go is look into the future at precision time protocol. But principally, the problem that we have with space-based time is the signal is extraordinarily weak. To give you an idea of how weak this is, the GPS satellites are broadcasting their signals with about 100 watts of power. Given the distance that they are away in the sky, effectively the energy that we receive at the surface of the Earth is approximately equivalent to if you took the 25-watt light bulb that's in your microwave oven, and you put that about 10,000 miles away, 16,000 kilometers, and you looked at that light bulb, that's about the same energy that your GPS receiver in your phone is using to determine its position. What that means is it's really, really easy to jam that signal with practically zero power being transmitted from these little jamming devices that you can buy online on eBay and whatnot. They're well known to be used in the haulage industry. Couriers use them to block out, their vans, tracking them and all this kind of thing. There's lots of interesting studies, on motorways in England where, they're able to basically show these nice distributions when like ferries are unloading and the HGVs are going past. At this point, monitoring all the different jammers that are on the road. Now, what happens is when these go past electricity substations is the clocks lose synchronization. And that's okay because they can deal with that for, tens of minutes or an hour, so maybe with holdover clocks. But it reveals there's a bit of a problem on relying on space-based time. If somebody wanted to attack a substation, it's absolutely possible to do that. But what's even worse is it's now possible to spoof the GPS signals, or all the GNSS constellations really, with really low-cost commodity hardware you can buy off Amazon. Like the Hack RF one is like €300. And incredibly, during 2016, 17, 18, there was a real quantum leap forward in the software for creating spoofed GNSS signals because of Pokemon Go. Kids basically decided that this was really interesting to get into and started to let their creativity flow in taking these researchers, open source repositories of GNSS software and really, really refining them so that they could, basically, there's a famous one of somebody was able to pick up a Pokemon in the middle of Pyongyang, sitting in their bedroom, because they're just able to trick their phone that that's where they were. But what that means is that if you wanted to come up with a sophisticated attack to steer a clock in a substation away from the true time, that could wreak havoc because that will start to cause protection systems to operate, disconnect transmission lines, disconnect generation, and so on. And it could all be very nasty. So this is where we are, is that the electricity grid is still running on GPS for the most part, not even the other constellations, for time. And it's been talked about for, as long as I can remember about this being a problem. For a long time I was feeling like I was this tinfoil hat guy, talking about this. But, well, not thankfully, but because of the Ukraine war, there's sort of more awareness of this now, and there's more interest in exploring solutions to synchronizing substations without relying on space-based solutions. There are a few other things around that I'm happy to chat about over at tea break, but the GNSS spoofing is something that we can do. It's actually really straightforward. If you put 3 antennas close to each other, they will resolve a unique position in space if they're listening to satellites. if it's somebody in a transit van down the road sending a jam signal, they'll all look like they're in the same position in space, and then that flags alarms and so on. But the MAS is difficult. So we want to go on to an alternative timeline here. We're going to say, right, we've been going down the wrong timeline of space-based time. We're going to go on a new timeline of something that is not so trivially easy to disrupt and interfere with. And the go-to technological solution for that at the moment is a technology called precision time protocol. Now, not to get into the long grass of how this works and how this differs from the likes of network time protocol, is precision time protocol to operate effectively uses hardware time stamping. So that means on the PHY, as in the silicon which interfaces with the physical media, there will be a physical hardware clock. And when special packets go through this, or actually it's a sequence in packets, that synchronizes the physical hardware clock, often down to picosecond resolution. And the host operating system doesn't have to really be involved in that whole process. In fact, it's desirable for the most part that the host operating system is just not involved in the precision time function. And what this gives then is a pulse per second out, which corresponds to the transition of the second in the UTC time base. Now, it has a very good proven track record in substations where it's already heavily standardized by the IEEE, but it has issues going across wide area networks. If you're in control of your WAN, it can be managed and it can work quite successfully. But electrical utilities had the bright idea during the 90s and noughties, for the most part, to sell all that infrastructure off. They're changing their minds about this now. But PTP over the internet, you're going to start bumping into systems which cannot do the hardware synchronization, and it degrades the quality of the time. So in terms of precision time protocol at Queen's, we have a few projects running. One that we're looking at with Broadband NI is a microwave solution. In fact, this has been funded by the National Physical Laboratory in the UK. And we're trying to demonstrate that we can do a solution that would sort of fit the needs of a utility that has woken up and realized that they need to be in control of a solution of their own. But with HEAnet, we have this very exciting opportunity in Belfast in that I think, it might be corrected here, but I think this is the first of the sites on HEAnet's network which can now trace its time back to NSAI over optical fibre, and there's a wee bit of copper in it, but for the most part, optical fibre. This gives us in Belfast this nice method to synchronize to UTC where there's no satellites involved whatsoever, which is a fabulous start. Now, what we're going to do with this is we want to build out a monitoring solution across the island which can trace its time with non-space-based technologies back to UTC. And sorry, I actually forgot I had this slide in. In terms of the clocks, we're using Raspberry Pis. Now, for the Raspberry Pi 4 generation, we have to use the Compute Module 4, and for this little example, but we're dealing with like commodity hardware here at this stage. Raspberry Pi 5, I believe all of the Raspberry Pi 5s will support hardware-based precision time protocol on them. We're seeing that we can get down to tens of nanoseconds time error on those. And it starts actually, you get into the long grass at that point where the length of your wires and the bench matter. So it takes us to be quite more rigorous than we're used to as power engineers. As power engineers, we're used to 50 hertz. That's what we like. So now that we're getting into sort of nanosecond resolution, it's a new world for us. So why the interest then in HEAnet's point of presence for a grid monitoring network? Ideally, we would be monitoring substations directly. But it has been, the world over, a world of pain doing that. Because the problem with directly monitoring electrical substations is you very quickly enter the world of the data can be market sensitive. and you start to deal with trades and energy between power stations and consumers and blah, 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 the utilities don't really want to do this. EirGrid, to be fair to them, have been quite supportive in providing us data with like sort of a time delay of a week or so that the market has passed. But it means that we're always slightly disconnected from sort of high quality real-time data. The real reason is this. We have tried to build phasor measurement unit networks in universities before, but it has always been a failure. We have sent many, many open PMU devices out into the wild. I have sent out at least 24, mostly across the UK, some to the United States. And even with very enthusiastic PhDs and postdocs and lecturers, they're trying to get these connected. Their own institution's information services department do not want a weird Raspberry Pi that somebody in Belfast made. So that's basically what it comes down to. So, throwing this in for a bit of a laugh, but I do take their point. I wouldn't connect it in my house. So, if somebody sent me some weird Raspberry Pi, I'm not going to plug that in. So ultimately what we really, really need is a single point of contact for this. And with HEAnet, fantastically, two things have happened. First of all, there is the time and frequency network, which operates on precision time protocol, which HEAnet have built and exists, which when I first found out about this was like dreams reality, the meme from Father Ted. But also the fact that the opportunity to put the phasor measurement units into their POPs means one point of contact, no longer dealing with network services and information services departments who don't want the devices, and there is now bandwidth. So we can get bandwidth back to actually get the data to Queen's or whoever wants it. Just a word on the bandwidth. So the next generation of phasor measurement units are going to store the actual time-synchronized sampled values. This is the hot topic that power engineers are all talking about. And power engineers think that this is a big data problem. The data rate that we're talking about here, they say, it's about 800 gigabytes per year, pushing a terabyte per year of data. It's like, it's tremendous. How are we ever going to be able to cope with that? But when you actually scale that back, it's about 200 kilobits per second. That's fine. This is one of the many examples where the world of the IEEE Power and Energy Society conference, and then all the other IEEE societies, that sort of deal with communications and data, and there is a tremendous disconnect. But what the time-synchronized sampled values will allow us to do is we'll be able to find all these very, very subtle disturbances in the grid, things that would be normally lost when we do what is effectively a form of compression when we create the phasors. It does create another challenge, though. It creates the problem of trying to find the useful piece of information or the useful needle of information in the massive haystack of data. That is something that I'm very keen to chat to people. There's been a lot of talk over the last number of days on machine learning. We need fresh ideas on that because the worst possible outcome for me is to build this machine and all it does is make megabucks for the hard disk drive manufacturers in that we will fill up drives upon drives of data that nobody really knows what to do with or can find anything useful out of it. That will be bad because I really do have this sort of sustainability mindset. I want this machine that we're building to be able to facilitate the installation of more low carbon technologies, not just create more electronic waste. That would be the bad side of that. So what I'm aiming for is the great coming together through this project with HEAnet is that power engineers who have these phasor measurement units are now at last working with network engineers who understand this challenge of time and frequency, and we're going to get time-synchronized measurements out of it. That's a wrap from me. So.
Thank you very much, David. That's a fascinating talk. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Is there a timescale for deployment of the HEAnet POPs yet?
Okay, so the long story with that is that I have a good number of devices that I moved house recently, so they're sitting in my garage waiting to be assembled and have the firmware uploaded into them. We were hoping to do this last summer, but just couldn't get it to happen. I am happy to get as many as possible from equipment I have at Queen's out ASAP, so let's put the time frame to that as months. But to sustain this project, I'm presently developing an application, a UK-Ireland one. So of course, I'm based in Belfast, so it'll be EPSRC in the UK, SFI in the Republic, to build this out in a serious effort, and ideally to bring in JISC in the UK and to have some of Great Britain monitored as well.
Any other questions?
You are saying this information has market value. Why do you think that the utilities are not doing what you're doing at the moment on their own, because that's money for them?
Right. So yeah, it's an interesting one that there's so many different angles to it. To be very direct about it, one utility engineer said to me that they know that the network is full of problems. The worst thing they could do is measure it. So that is the thing that happens. The people who would be interested in gaming the market would be, say, owners of thermal power stations for the most part. I have suggested that this is the sort of network that they might be interested to fund, but so far no bites on that. But it definitely falls into a slightly unethical category of research, that. But why the grid has not built out this network in a serious way, it's difficult to say. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, is when you go to a power engineering conference, you'll sit and listen to PhDs presenting on ludicrously complicated methodologies which are very, very disconnected from the reality of the electrical grid. And the engineers are just not seeing the business case to put these things in. So hopefully, in building this power, there's no real large-scale academic network for this. Everything's done in simulation. And of course, whenever you do a simulation in MATLAB, it all works perfectly. And the number of times I've sat and listened to PhDs, and good work, like the mathematics are sound, but they've used this perfect clean data from simulation, and it says I've found this very subtle fault, and it works 99% of the time. And but you know that this will not work in reality. So the ambition with this is that we will have a large collection of real data, and because the Irish grid is quite wobbly, it should have plenty of interesting things in it. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, for the most part, we're just using very rudimentary crystal oscillators. So yeah, rubidium clocks. They're absolutely accurate enough for this. The CSACs that we're finding now that can hold over for days with microsecond resolution are starting to enter the utility market. But again, it's this interesting quirk of legacy technology. If data centers are using an awful lot of these technologies that were designed for the electrical grid and for interconnecting electricity substations and substation devices. And if we were speaking a decade ago, the data centers hadn't really bitten on that. So a lot of the conferences were talking about how these technologies are unproven, there's problems with interoperability, blah, blah, blah. But the data centers just came along and started using them and proved that it all works. So at least that's been settled. And of course, in the data center environment, yes, holdover clocks, not a problem, makes totally rational sense. They're gradually now starting to enter the electrical utility sector as well.
Thank you again, Dr. David Laverty.